What is up, guys? Happy Tuesday. We're going to be hanging out going over the waiver wire tonight. It is Tuesday, December 17th. We are entering week 16. We are in the final four of fantasy football. Happy to be here. Hope everyone's doing well. If you guys want to get your comments or your questions into the chat queue, I will get to them shortly. I'm just going to kind of read over some of the injuries that we're going to monitor throughout the week, and then I'll kind of list off a little bit of my favorite guys on the waiver wire for this week. Quarterbacks, Patrick Mahomes with the ankle injury, but he practiced in full today. They're actually expressing a little bit of optimism that we might see him on Saturday against the Texans. So it is, an extra day early. They also have the game on Christmas Day, Wednesday of next week here. So they have two games coming up in the next about the next 10 days. So that's a lot. I don't think we're going to see Pat Mahomes, but after practicing in full today, maybe I'm wrong. We'll see. So that's the big one we're monitoring for the quarterbacks. Geno Smith's another big name to monitor at the quarterback position. He's got the knee injury. Sam Howell came in and did not look good. A lot of sacks given up by that Seattle Seahawks offensive line to the Packers, and now you're going to get the Vikings at home. I don't think, if you're in a one QB league, you're probably not relying on Geno Smith, and we're probably not going to look at Sam Howell too, even in a super flex league. So we'll talk about Seahawks guys, I'm sure, later. But Tommy DeVito concussion, I don't think we're going to see him this week. We'll see. Derek Carr, they pretty much said he's not playing anymore this year, so goodbye, Saints. Aiden O'Connell with the knee injury. They kind of need Aiden O'Connell back in there. He's been their best quarterback this year. Questionable. We'll see if he goes this week and kind of unlock maybe Jacoby Myers and Brock Bowers. And then Drew Lock with the elbow heel injury. We'll be watching to see who's the starter for the New York Giants. The running back position, we got some heavy hitters here. Alvin Kamara is dealing with a groin issue. He's questionable. I'm going to say he's probably doubtful. Just this season is gone down the drain. Saints not looking so good. Alvin Kamara probably not going to play. And they do play Monday night, so hopefully we get that answer before Monday Night Football. But as of right now, I'm planning to be without Alvin Kamara in leagues that I have him. RB David Montgomery, torn MCL, likely season ending. It sucks, man. We had a really good running back too all season long, man. He was locked into touches, locked into touchdowns, and now we're without him. So that's one of the big losses heading into week 16. No David Montgomery. Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be my RB1 in my rankings tomorrow when they come out. He is set up to be he's going to score the most running back points for the next couple weeks. DeAndre Swift with the groin injury. I know he looked good last night, but he's still going to probably be on the injury report this week. Nick Chubb broke his foot, likely season ending. We can talk Jerome Ford and some of the other guys on Cleveland here, but Nick Chubb, just a tough year for Cleveland and a worse year for Nick Chubb here. Trey Benson, rookie for the Cardinals. He's got an ankle injury. We're going to monitor that. Running back Jaleel McLaughlin for Denver has a quad injury. We'll monitor that. And then Braylon Allen for the Jets. He's got a back injury. Receiver, there's not too many receiver injuries that I'm worried about. Jalen Waddle with the knee injury is the big one. Xavier Legette's got a groin and a wrist thing. I'm not sure we're going to see him. They pretty much already said he's not going to play. And then Alec Pierce with a concussion. I think he's doubtful. And then at tight end, the big one was Zach Ertz with a concussion. I might have missed a couple of the injuries there, guys, but for the most part, those are the names that I'm watching practice reports for this week. If you need a quarterback, let's go over my favorite ads. If you need a quarterback this week, not a lot of great options. I do think, Saturday's game, Russell Wilson against the Ravens, like that. We like that matchup on paper here. The Baltimore Ravens do allow a lot of fantasy points, so Russell Wilson's not a bad one. Otherwise, guys like, Jared Goff's only 30. He is 70% owned. My bad. Some of the guys that I like on waiver wire this week that are low owned: Drake May at Buffalo. I know it's not a great matchup, but he just finds a way to get fantasy points with his legs and usually scrapes a touchdown or two together. Aaron Rodgers at home against the Rams. It's a good matchup. Had his best game that we've seen from fantasy in a while. He had 30 fantasy points, probably the most fantasy points he's had in the last 3 or 4 years. So Rodgers with Adams and such looking okay, and they still have they still have something to say here at the end of the year with just how they look and how they perform. Caleb Williams, maybe not so exciting against Detroit, but Detroit's defense, man, has been decimated. I'm open to Caleb Williams. It didn't look great last night. He had 9 fantasy points, but the 4 games before that, he's been playing well enough to maybe consider him at home against Detroit. Anthony Richardson, if you need a quarterback against Tennessee, he has that upside with his legs and the rushing upside and the deep ball. And then the last one here is Matthew Stafford at New York Jets. I think the Jets-Rams game could be kind of a sneaky, high-scoring affair. If you need a running back this weekend, it's still not a great weekend for it. A lot of people are going to be looking at Tajay Spears, which I don't think he's a great start. He did score 2 touchdowns, but those are not necessarily going to stick every week. So maybe he gets more volume. Tony Pollard is kind of dinged up. They don't have much to play for. They've already benched Will Levis, so they're going to be going to Mason Rudolph, which could help some of the passing numbers. So Tajay Spears interests me a little bit. Tank Bigsby interests me. The Jags have a nice matchup against the Raiders this week. They could run the ball on the Raiders. And then Jerome Ford stepping in for for Nick Chubb, and then Kendre Miller, who I think is going to be starting for the Saints. Those are the top running backs that I'm looking for. If you guys need deeper running backs, we can get to that list. At the receiver position, if Adam Thielen's still out there in your leagues, like pick him up. I know he's about 56% owned on ESPN, but I just thought, maybe there's a chance he's still out there. He should be owned. Otherwise, guys like Romeo Doubs, Rashad Bateman, Jalen McMillan, Quentin Johnston, Christian Watson, and Demario Douglas, those would be my top receiver ads. If you guys need deeper ones, just ask in the chat and we can go deeper. Tight ends, it's a good week for tight ends. Brenton Strange for the Jags looks pretty good. Stone Smart for the Chargers looks good, and then Noah Gray, he catches touchdowns, man. But if Pat Mahomes isn't in, I won't like Noah Gray. And then defenses for this week, you got to get Buffalo at home against New England. You got to get the Packers at home against the Saints, and then I kind of like the Titans at home against or at Indianapolis. Titans still kind of a stingy defense. So those are my waiver wire ads, and it looks like I got a lot of comments in here. So good evening, everybody. Good evening, JSC, Harris, Jason's in here. Sport Dog with the first question of the evening. Yeah, I'm assuming Zach Ertz is not going to play with a concussion. I can get Tucker Kraft, Freiermuth, or Kincaid. Anyone favored over the other for tight end. I do like Tucker Kraft, but I'm a little bit worried that the game script for the Packers could be just run heavy and it's not going to be competitive. I would be shocked if Jordan Love throws the ball more than 25 times in that game. So with Kraft, you're banking heavily on efficiency, for him to catch 3-4 passes and one of those passes just to be a touchdown. So I do like Kraft. He has a pretty nice floor, but I think in this situation, you probably go with Dalton Kincaid here. And I do like Freiermuth. He's been playing better the last couple of weeks. He's got a touchdown in 3 of the last 3 games, 4 touchdowns in the last 6 games. So he's playing well with Russell Wilson. The last game against Baltimore, though, only 2 for 14. I don't think he's got all that high of a ceiling. I do like Freiermuth. I think if I'm going to rank these guys, though, I'm going to go Kincaid, Kraft, and Freiermuth. And good question here on Sincere McCormick. So he left the game early last night, which was a bummer because I thought he was going to get the ball a lot last night. The way the game was going the first couple drives, he had like 6 touches, 7 touches. So, it doesn't look good. I'm not seeing anything official, but there's a message from Sincere McCormick to the fans. I'm wondering if this is a season-ending injury. Okay, so McCormick addressed his Instagram saying he'll be back next season. So it looks like his season's over. No more Sincere McCormick. So that's going to push up Amir Abdullah and Alexander Madison. So Sincere McCormick likely done for the year. He's RB1, man. He's RB1. We did get some games last year where David Montgomery did not play and Jahmyr Gibbs was the RB1. Let me pull those numbers up here, actually. Let me see. So 2023, David Montgomery missed weeks about 7, 8, and 9. And in those games last year, week 7, 8, and 9, Jahmyr Gibbs, in those games, 27.6 PPR points, 29.9 PPR points, baller. 26 carries for 152 yards, 11 for 68. A lot of receptions, man. It's all going to Jahmyr Gibbs. He's basically Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery rolled into one. They're not going to really use a lot of running back twos. So Gibbs is the RB1. Good evening, Justin. Last week we started Josh Allen, Jahmyr Gibbs. Oh, my goodness, you're sick. That is filthy. And then that's 100 points right there. Let's see. We have Ertz. Yep, we covered that one. We're gonna go with Dalton Kincaid, and then I would rank Kraft second, Frymuth third. Yeah, the Raiders. I just looked at the Twitter machine here, and it does say Sincere McCormick put out an Instagram post saying that he's going to be back next season. So plan for a heavy dose of Alexander Madison and Amir Abdullah. That's going to be the split heading into Week 16. It's a good, interesting matchup going against Jacksonville, like one of the worst teams against the running back here. They do allow, I believe they allow the second or third most running back points per game here. They actually allow, let's see if I can find it. They rank 30th, so the third worst against the running back position. I'm open to Madison or Abdullah. Abdullah has been catching the passes and getting the touchdowns, but I think both guys could be in play. I don't think so, Jason. I think they're just going to give Jahmyr Gibbs 25 touches. I do like Craig Reynolds, but for us to assume that they're just going to slide Craig Reynolds into a David Montgomery-sized role of double-digit carries and a few catches, I don't think that's likely. If anything, it's maybe 4 carries and a catch or 2 for Craig Reynolds. If you want to just maybe say, hey, maybe Gibbs gets hurt Week 16, you can hold on to Craig Reynolds, and then if not, you can cut him Week 17. But I think he's more of just an injury handcuff stash for 1 week, which isn't always my favorite play. Good evening to Brett. Ooh, in a standard league. So we need to ask who's going to catch the touchdowns here. I'm probably not going to go with Tajay Spears. I think those touchdowns are more fluky. Whereas Devonta Smith, it's hard because the Eagles just don't really throw a lot of touchdowns. So I think right now, like Keenan Allen has been catching touchdowns. Devonta Smith does have 2 touchdowns in the last 2 games. They're playing Washington. I think it's a good spot for him. But Keenan Allen, man, he's got 4 touchdowns in the last 4 games. He seems to be getting a ton of targets as well. So I think Keenan Allen actually against Detroit might be a good spot. And the last time Keenan Allen played Detroit was on Thanksgiving. He went 5 for 73 and 2 touchdowns. Otherwise, I do like Khalil Shakir. He seems to have like a safe floor for yards and things like that, but he doesn't get a lot of touchdowns. He does have 2 touchdowns on the last 2 games. I'm probably going to rank these guys as Keenan Allen, Devonta Smith, Shakir, and then Spears kind of a little bit lower on the list. I think that's a little bit more fluky. Whereas you have very good starting receivers. I'm going to go Keenan Allen here. Again, I'm not too interested in Craig Reynolds. I mean, in those games last year where Montgomery missed, it was just the Jahmyr Gibbs show, and I think it's going to be more of the same here. We've seen a couple games this year where Gibbs gets up to 19 and 21 carries. We know he can handle a full workload here. I think it's going to be 90% his backfield. Even though they like Craig Reynolds, I wouldn't consider starting Craig Reynolds at all. If anything, maybe he gets like a garbage touchdown, which is not a good bet. And pretty much the only bet here is that if Gibbs gets hurt in Week 16, you have Craig Reynolds for Week 17. That's pretty much the only line of thinking that I would add Craig Reynolds. Nope. Yeah, it's a stretch. Is Pickens supposed to be playing? I hope so. Let me pull up the practice reports from last week. So today they listed him as DNP. It's Tuesday, but they're listing him like today was a walkthrough practice, so he was a non-participant, which is a bit disappointing. But we'll know more tomorrow because tomorrow, this game's on Saturday, so tomorrow is a big day for them in terms of practice and getting the offense installed. So we're gonna know tomorrow. I think he's gonna play. This is a big game for the Steelers. They need to get that passing game going against Baltimore. I think he's going to try and go, but right now it's still unknown. We'll have an idea tomorrow. I actually kind of like Ty Johnson in deeper formats. So I have a friend in my most important league, Jesse, and he lost David Montgomery this week, and he's in the Final Four. And our waiver wire is just way too sharp. And we're looking at guys like Ty Johnson, Devin Singletary, Antonio Gibson, guys like that on the waiver wire. It's not pretty. And what do we get with Ty Johnson? The last few games, maybe the last month or so, he's actually been the running back 2 on Buffalo over Ray Davis. He's had huge workloads in the passing game the last 2 games here. He's had 114 yards in week 15 and 55 yards against the Rams in week 14. He doesn't get a lot of carries, so you're banking on him catching 2 or 3 passes in this game and getting his 2 or 3 carries, which the floor is anywhere from 2 to 7 points. And then obviously if he scores a touchdown, that's what's going to slap it. So he's definitely worth like monitoring and putting on the end of your bench. I don't know if I'm comfortable starting him unless you're in the deepest of circumstances. And yeah, I'm not really interested in Dorian Thompson-Robinson led offenses. I'm going to pull up the numbers from last year because he did get a couple starts last year, so there should be some growth in his game. And so he had 3 starts last year. They lost 29-12 to Denver. They beat the Steelers 13-10, and then they lost to the Ravens 28-3. And in the one good game, like he hasn't, his best passing output was 165 yards. He's got 1 career touchdown in that season. He threw 4 interceptions in that season as well. He does like to run the ball a little bit, which could help, move first downs and things like that. But this is really not a guy that can sustain fantasy weapons. So like I'm probably going to end up having Jerry Jeudy ranked pretty low in my rankings. David Njoku did go 6 for 59 in one of those games last year. Cedric Tillman went 4 for 55 and Elijah Moore went 3 for 44. So maybe there's a little bit of hope that some juice could be had here, but like I'm not. It's the Bengals defense too, which is something that we want to target. Here in the win against the Steelers, it looks like David Njoku 7 for 56, Elijah Moore 6 for 60, Amari Cooper 4 for 34. So there's a little bit of hope here, but not a ton. I do think Jerome Ford interests me, though. If you need a running back, it's Jerome Ford. Do you like Denver defense this week? I'm very open to Denver defense this week. The Chargers offense really hasn't been all that hot. And if you look, Thursday nights are traditionally a lower scoring game. If I'm looking at the game lines here on the fantasyfellowship.com, the Chargers are supposed to score. Where are we? They got the Chargers at 22.75 points. The Chargers are picked to win by 3, actually. So maybe I don't like Denver defense. Let me look at the practice reports for Denver today. Because I thought Pat Surtain was in questions. Full practice for Surtain. A couple other guys did not practice today. I don't know. I'm not super in love with Denver defense this week. I would look for other defenses if I can. I still think they're probably a top 10 defense, though. The Chargers offense is not all of a sudden, lighting it up. They don't really have a run game. I'm okay with the Broncos, but they're like a fringe top 10 play for me this week. Falcons, Colts, or Bengals. It's probably the Bengals just out of, I guess, understanding that Dorian Thompson-Robinson is an unproven year 2 quarterback, doesn't really have a great throwing background. He likes to run the ball. There should be turnovers. It's a home game for Cincinnati. I'm probably going to end up ranking Cincinnati a little bit higher. I also do like the Falcons defense. So both of those teams, I think I would take over the Colts. I would take both those defenses over the Broncos. If I had to pick one right now, it's hard because I don't know who the starting quarterback is for the Giants. So I'm going to lean Bengals by a hair, but I think Cincy and Atlanta are both like potential top 5 defenses this week. And good evening to Jose. Pick one, Schultz, Strange, or Henry. I'm going with Bretton Strange, man. He's a guy that has looked good. He's a second-year tight end. He's had some moments this year where Evan Ingram's been out and he's been capable. He's caught some touchdowns. Back in week 3, he caught a touchdown. Back in week 5, he caught a touchdown. And the volume last week is very hard to ignore. 11 for 73 on 12 targets. And there's just really nobody else to throw the ball to there. You got Brian Thomas Jr. and the receiver, the backup receivers are not all that great. So I expect Strange to, again, rack up some volume. He's playing the Raiders, which is a good matchup. They've actually been pretty friendly to opponent tight ends. So I'm all aboard the Bretton Strange wagon. The last few games, the Raiders have allowed a lot of points to tight ends, man. Some big numbers here allowed by the Raiders to tight ends. So I'm going to go Bretton Strange. I would rank Henry 2nd, Schultz 3rd if I'm ranking those 3. I don't think we're going to see Will Dissly this week. I think it's going to be Stone Smart, which actually, like, I kind of like Stone Smart too. He did go 5 for 50 last week, and he had a fumble, which was disappointing, but he is an interesting guy. I kind of just personally, I have a rule where I don't like starting fringe starting players on Thursday Night Football. I want Thursday night. I want my studs in. I don't want to be whipping out the Chargers second, third string tight end when I need one. I would rather go with Brenton Strange here. If I'm ranking these guys, I would go Strange, Smart, and then Cole Kmet. Cole Kmet's interesting this week because they play the Lions. We know the Lions have had some issues, but Cole Kmet's been pretty much phased out of this offense since like October. So he's just not a good play right now. He shouldn't be on our radar. Miller or Abdullah. Man, if Alvin Kamara is indeed out, I usually would lean with the volume player, which could be Kendre Miller, but you also just have to worry, man, like, what's that going to look like? The Packers are going to probably play pretty good defense and bottle up the running game. So kind of leaning towards Abdullah. Excuse me. Excuse me. So I'll probably have Abdullah and Miller ranked pretty closely. And Abdullah has looked good in moments here. So I think it's Abdullah by a hair. Again, I don't really trust Alvin Kamara to play, but I really don't want anything to do with that game. As far as the Saints offense, the Packers are 13.5-point home favorites. The Saints are only projected to score 14 points. So, if Kendre doesn't get a touchdown, you're looking at what, maybe 5 or 6 points. I don't really know if that's what I want to be doing. So it's probably Abdullah by a hair, and hey, no problem, Brett. I'm open to David Moore. I don't think I'm in love with David Moore, though. The Panthers, interesting spot. Xavier Legette's probably not playing. I don't know if they've already ruled him out or whatever, but I would expect him not to play. So the 3 receivers last week ahead of Legette, we saw Jalen Coker run 31 routes out of 37. Adam Thielen led the way with 33 routes out of 37. And then David Moore did run 24, but Legette had 13 of those. So there might be a situation where David Moore's just out there a lot. He just might be out there a lot and getting routes and targets. He did have the one blow up game. I think I would rather have Jalen Coker if I had to choose between, Coker and David Moore. But he's going to be out there a lot. I'm kind of interested in it a little bit. Let me see here. The Carolina Panthers are projected to score 21.5 points against Arizona. They're at home against Arizona. It's not a bad spot for David Moore. I don't like him, but I don't hate him either. So I'm kind of lukewarm on David Moore. Sport Dog, I do think he has a chance to play this week. He did not practice today, but today's a walkthrough for the Steelers here. They play on Saturday, so we're going to get hopefully a big limited or full practice in tomorrow. He's been off his feet, from practicing for a couple weeks here, missed a couple games. I have a feeling he's going to play this one. It's a big divisional game against the Ravens. I'm going to lean towards him playing. Good evening, Charlene. We haven't seen you in a while. 6-8, and we made the semifinals. Awesome. And I've been sick now since it's Tuesday night. I've been sick here since December 6th, which is 2 or 3 Tuesdays ago, and I just can't shake this cold. So hopefully you feel better there, Charlene. Yeah, I'm not quite sure how to feel about Kenneth Walker coming back, especially with the potential downgrade at quarterback to Sam Howell, which it looked pretty bad when Sam Howell went in. It did not look good. I worry about them going up against a really good Vikings defense that can generate pressure and kind of disguise a lot of things and basically just kind of negate that offense and make them throw the ball a lot, because guess what? That Vikings offense is really freaking good too. So, I'm nervous about the Seattle Seahawks running game against the Vikings. I'm probably going to end up ranking him as a low-end RB2. If you guys have better options, I think I'm probably benching Kenneth Walker this week. And hey, can we rank these waivers? Kendre Abdullah, Reynolds, Corum, Ty Johnson, Justice Hill. There's only 2 guys on this list that I would consider startable, and that's going to be Kendre Miller and Abdullah. You could maybe argue that Justice Hill could be that third guy on the list here, but his usage is very hard to predict. But the last few games he's had, 17.8, 6, 14, and 8. You're gambling for a touchdown with Justice Hill. which I think is fine. But if Kendre Miller is the starting running back this week for the Saints, I think he's in play. But I'm going to go Abdullah, Kendre, Justice Hill. Those are really the only three options that I'm going to look at. I'm going to ignore Craig Reynolds. There is a chance where he could get some garbage time carries at the end of the game, but I don't really want to rely on that. I think it's going to be the Gibbs show. Corum, just purely a handcuff for now. If you want to add Corum, I think that's fine. If Kieran Williams goes down this week, like we're all going to be starting Blake Corum in the fantasy championship. And then Ty Johnson, I just don't think there's enough to trust there. He has been catching the ball better of late. But I can't recommend starting Ty Johnson. So it's going to be Abdullah, Kendre, Justice as my top three guys that I would be open to getting. And here's a good rule of thumb from Charlene. Don't mess it up, guys. Let's start our studs. Would I rather have Tim Patrick over David Moore? Sure. We'll go with Tim Patrick. Tim Patrick's been on a heater, man. He's making a lot of plays, and he's firmly entrenched at that wide receiver 3 spot. He runs pretty much all the routes. They rely heavily on 3 wide receiver stuff, and he had 8 targets last game. I think Tim Patrick's a fine option if you need somebody. I'd rather play. So like Tim Patrick is the wide receiver 3 on the Lions. David Moore, the wide receiver 3 on the Panthers. Lions is going to weigh a little bit heavier for me. So would you spend a first priority on Ford? He will fight for a flex spot with Marvin Harrison Jr. and Hopkins. Who among those 3 guys do you prefer in the playoffs? Dang. There's a lot to consider here with Pat Mahomes potentially missing this game. If Mahomes is not playing, I'm not playing DeAndre Hopkins. I'm kind of not super excited about DeAndre Hopkins. He hasn't really been, humming on all cylinders. Last week, he was the 4th receiver in terms of snaps and routes. I don't necessarily know if he's a guy that I want in my fantasy lineup this weekend here. It's a tough game against the Texans. They have good cornerbacks. I would probably shy away from D-Hop. I'm probably going to give it to Marvin Harrison Jr., who I know he has his ups and downs, but when he scores touchdowns, that's when the big games come. And you get Carolina this week, which is a solid matchup. So I'm not afraid to play Marvin Harrison Jr. this weekend. I'm open to spending money on Jerome Ford because, you might get a chance to start him in week 17 as well. And if you do feel comfortable starting Jerome Ford, it's a good matchup. And he's a quality running back. It's a good matchup for him against Cincinnati. They played Cincinnati earlier this year. Jerome Ford didn't play in that game, so I don't know how he would have done. But we see the big playability. He broke the big touchdown off last week. He's a good receiving back. I would expect him to get you 7 to 10 PPR points. So he's got like a really nice, safe floor. I just don't know if I trust him to score a touchdown and have that ceiling play. So if I'm ranking those 3 guys, I'm going to go Marvin, Ford, Hopkins, and I think I would. I think I would go after Jerome Ford because it blocks other teams from potentially starting him. And if there's really nobody else on your waivers, it's not a bad idea to get that top waiver spot. And with only 1 week left, man, like we gotta use what we got. It's hard to catch up. Yeah. What are your top 5 defenses for next week in the final? Let's take a look at defenses for next week. All righty, we got the Miami Dolphins at Cleveland. I like that for Miami. We have the Colts at New York Giants. It's not a bad one. We have Buffalo at home against the New York Jets. I don't mind that one. I do like maybe the Titans at Jacksonville. There's not a lot of good defenses next week, guys. The Chargers. I like the Chargers at New England next week. I think that's a really good spot for the Chargers to start for you. Tampa Bay against Carolina is another good one. I'm not seeing really anything jump off the page here, though. So I'm going to stick with who's that? I like Miami a lot. I think they're a top 5 play. I like the Chargers. I like Tampa Bay. If you're trying to be a week ahead here. Otherwise, Philly's probably owned already. Raiders at the Saints. You can maybe go Raiders defense. They continue to play hard. They limited the Falcons last night to 15 points. Maybe the Raiders at New Orleans. That's kind of an ugly one. I don't know if I want to trust that. We took Bijan Robinson and Charbonnet out of my 2 flex spots. Need two Pickens, Jennings, Collins, Judy, Moore, Garendo, or Addison. I like Judy, Addison, or Pickens. I'm kind of iffy on Jerry Jeudy with Dorian Thompson-Robinson being the guy. There is a chance that he does get pummeled with targets and continues to play well. But you're playing Nico Collins. That's the one that I think makes the most sense. And then I'm probably going to go with Garendo, man. Give me Garendo. With a few extra days to get rested, I think Garendo is probably looking at a pretty healthy workload this week. Let me see where I have his numbers coming in at. Where is Garendo? Yeah, I'm going to go Garendo at Miami. So I took Bijan and Charbonnet out of my 2 flex spots. Okay, so they got pushed up. So we need 2 between Pickens, Jennings, Collins, Judy, Moore, Garendo, or Addison. I'm going to go Collins and Garendo as your best 2 options. Judy would be my 3rd. And then Addison and then probably Pickens is probably how I would rank them. So we might have a little differing opinions here. Yes. So everyone's going to be chasing Tajay Spears this week. I don't know if I recommend that. He did look good catching the ball. Mason Rudolph did throw him the ball a lot. You're gambling for touchdowns. He's probably a 7 to 10 point PPR play. So I'm probably going to go Madison over Spears. Fairborn or Aubrey and Daniels or Murray. I'm going with Kaimi Fairbairn against the Chiefs, and I'm going to go with Daniels against the Eagles. Oh, wow, the Cup Goose, and you still passed it. Yeah, a lot of people did not. A lot of people got cupped last weekend. Yeah, man, you got me good, dude. I was disappointed because most leagues that I set up, Aiden, I do it where the teams that are in the playoffs, they don't have opponents. They're all playing each other, and then I put the top 3 scores into the final 4. I was disappointed, but you got me good. Maserati Marvin, I'm pulling for you in the free league, my man. And the Cardinals are a good defense as well. But hey, guys, I have been live for about a good 32 minutes. I'm going to get out of here for the evening. We will be going live tomorrow night, 7 o'clock Central Time. If you guys want to hang out, we'll go over all the practice, participation, and get you guys any questions you might have. I want to wish you all good luck with your waivers. I'm going to go Jerome Ford here rest of season just because I know he's going to be the main guy. They're still going to mix in, a couple other guys behind him, but Ford should be the lead back on this team. Whereas Madison, they're still going to mix in Abdullah. They might mess around with a couple other guys. But I'm going to lean Ford here, feel a little bit better. I think Ford's looking pretty good. And yeah, Brian Thomas Jr. Oh my God, dude. Brian Thomas Jr. How high do we take Brian Thomas Jr. in fantasy drafts next year? I think he's a top 10 receiver next year, my man. He's probably a round 2 pick, a round 2, round 3 pick in fantasy drafts. And Judy's been fantastic, but I get real nervous when I see Dorian Thompson-Robinson in there. I'm going to probably lean some of my other spots. Your Jordan Addison's been looking fantastic. I would rather play Addison over Judy, but you're playing Nico Collins. And then I'm going to lean Garendo because he continues to look good and he's the bell cow back. So those are probably my 2 guys. I'd probably rank Addison 3rd behind those guys. So, and yeah, we'll see who the Jags coach is. But anyways, guys, I want to thank you for hanging out with me. We had a lot of people in the crowd tonight. It looks like we got 22 people with us. So, hey, if you're new, definitely subscribe, like the video. That helps us grow. Check out thefantasyfellowship.com. And again, tomorrow night, 6:30 p.m. Central Time, or 7 o'clock Central Time, we'll go live and get you guys hooked up with all the answers you need. So take it easy. Peace. Got me feeling icy.